That is about one of the most ridiculous things I've heard in recent times. Aaron Judge is one of the great players in the game. You won't be booing Aaron Judge for long. Welcome everyone to the Monday edition of Fair Territory. We are back for another week. Monday show, Thursday show, and what I want to start off talking about today is the fact that it's getting a little bit later in the season now. I know we're not a month in, but the question must be asked with regard to certain players. Is it too soon to panic? And I'm going to talk about 4 players today. 4 players in different circumstances, all veterans, of course, but 4 guys that to varying degrees are causing concern with their respective fan bases. And you talk all the time in baseball, you hear all the time in baseball about the back of the baseball card. Managers will say this constantly. Hey, go to the back of the baseball card. You'll see what this guy's capable of doing. That's correct. And in most cases, the back of the baseball card does not lie. And players generally go to their performance over a career, whether good or bad. They revert to that performance. So I expect that in some of these cases that we're going to talk about, some of these players will get back to their career norms. But there is cause for concern in each case, and let's go through it, starting with a guy who attracted a lot of attention this past offseason, a guy who is the reigning National League Cy Young Award winner, signed very late in spring training. You know who I'm talking about. Blake Snell, left-handed pitcher, San Francisco Giants. He's off to a horrible start. First 3 starts, 11.57 ERA. Now, remember, Blake Snell did not have a spring training for the most part, and he joined the Giants late March, like the guy he faced Friday night, Jordan Montgomery. Jordan Montgomery, making his first start for the Arizona Diamondbacks, pitched really well. 6 innings, outpitched Blake Snell in what I kind of called the Boras Bowl. 2 Scott Boras clients, or at least 1 Scott Boras client and 1 former Scott Boras client. Montgomery has since left for Wasserman. So what do we make of Snell? Well, here's the thing. He generally has been, not always, but generally has been a slower starter in his career. And let's go back to last season, his Cy Young season, when he did some remarkable things after starting slowly. His first 9 starts last year, 5.40 ERA. His last 23 starts, one of the great runs in recent memory, 1.20 ERA. So, is Blake Snell capable of doing the same thing? Absolutely, he is capable of doing the same thing. You do wonder if, after signing that 2-year, $62 million free agent contract with an opt-out after 1 year, if he might feel a little extra pressure, because, of course, the idea was to opt out after this year, but at the same time, he had the same circumstance last year. He was going to become a free agent. So, Snell, we would expect, is going to get better. The question is how soon. And let's face it, the Giants aren't off to the greatest of starts. Another Scott Boras client who signed late, Matt Chapman, is running about a league average OPS plus right now. The Giants need Snell to be really good, and they need him to be really good quickly. So we'll have to see how that plays out with Blake Snell. But again, you go back to last year alone, and he was really good. The second guy on our list is someone that I never expected to see struggle like this in his career, period, but is struggling mightily right now after struggling in the spring. I'm talking about Cardinals first baseman Paul Goldschmidt. Paul Goldschmidt, one of the great players in our game in the past decade. First baseman, guy's done some amazing things. Offensively, he's been a good defender. He's been a really good player overall. Maybe even a borderline Hall of Fame case. And yet this season, let's look at the numbers. They are not pretty at all. Goldschmidt, his career OPS in March and April, this is not a slow starter. His career OPS entering this season, March, April, 855. Spring training this year, 478 OPS. And now through 21 games, 507. Now, Paul Goldschmidt is 36. Paul Goldschmidt is a guy also in a contract year, and if you remember, the Cardinals said, you know what, we're going to hold off. Let's see how the season goes. Let's see how it starts, and maybe we'll revisit it during the season. Maybe we'll just wait until after the season. I don't believe Paul Goldschmidt is being affected by contractual pressure. I don't know why he is struggling, and people who have seen him aren't quite clear on it either. He did have issues in spring training. He was trying to get his timing down and really never got on track. So here's a guy that, again, is a major part of his team, along with Nolan Arenado, who has not been great either. Nolan Arenado, 1 home run in 86 at-bats. The Cardinals as a whole, 13 home runs. The entire team has 13 home runs. Only the White Sox have fewer. And we know this. The Cardinals rely heavily on Goldschmidt and Arenado to be all-star, borderline Hall of Fame type players. Arenado, I'm sure, will be a Hall of Famer. So Goldschmidt is another one that you have to be worried about at this point. Will he eventually click? Will he get back to the player he once was? Obviously, I would imagine we all expect that. I can't believe Paul Goldschmidt is going to struggle like this the whole year. But he's struggling now, and the Cardinals, a team that needed to get off to a hot start, has not done anything of the sort. Third on this list, another first baseman, and this guy makes Paul Goldschmidt look hot. I'm talking, of course, about Astros first baseman Jose Abreu. Jose Abreu is also an older player. He's 37. He's a guy that had his difficulties last season, if you remember, and then made a mechanical adjustment, kind of quieted down his approach at the plate, less movement, and in September and the postseason was something like the Jose Abreu of old. Right now, though, it is anything but that for Jose Abreu. And let's look at his numbers as we go forward here. These are astonishing. Jose Abreu is 4 for 59, 1 extra base hit, .068 batting average, and a .223 OPS. That's his combined on-base and slugging percentage, .223. He has nearly as many errors, 3, as hits, 4. Now, this is a huge problem for the Astros. He has a 3-year, $58.5 million contract. This is the second of those 3 years. They have started mixing in John Singleton, a left-handed hitter, and perhaps can go to something of a platoon. But Singleton is not exactly an accomplished player. He hasn't been hot himself. And how this works out for the Astros, really no one has any idea. They've got a kid at AAA, Joey Loperfido, who has a chance to be a pretty good prospect. He's been really hot to start the season. But are you going to throw him in there and expect him to be a productive player? Are you going to release Jose Abreu with $30+ million left on his contract? These are questions that the Astros suddenly are facing that they never expected to face. He's not the reason they are off to such a terrible start, Abreu, but he is part of the problem. They have not hit to the level that they need to hit to be the team that they want to be because they've had pitching issues as well. Josh Hader, he could be on this list. He is not off to a good start himself as a closer. Presley has struggled. Brian Abreu has struggled. This is a team that is a bit of a mess right now. All right, moving on to a team that is not a mess, but a pitcher who is having his difficulties. Again, like all of these other players we're talking about, an accomplished veteran. And actually, this guy is one of the great gentlemen of the game, someone who has had a really nice career, even though he doesn't throw a million miles an hour. He is the professor. He is Kyle Hendricks. And Kyle Hendricks' numbers right now are, goodness gracious, awful. He is a guy that is really kind of trying to find himself. As we look at what he's doing right now, you're looking at some of the worst numbers in Major League Baseball for a starting pitcher. 5 starts, 21 innings pitched, has yet to go more than 5 innings. 8 home runs allowed, that's the most in the majors. ERA of 12. He's allowed 37 hits in 21 innings. That's tied for the most. He's also allowed the most earned runs. Now, Kyle Hendricks yesterday on Sunday thought that he made some progress. And okay, maybe he did. Still lasted only 4 innings. And I'm always concerned when I hear players in the middle of a slump like this say, well, I saw some good signs. I wonder if they're reaching and trying to justify to themselves what's going on and rationalize. Or maybe they are seeing good signs, and maybe Kyle Hendricks is about to come out of this in some fashion. He, too, is an older guy. He's 34. And obviously, you wonder with all of these players, is this the start of a major decline? Is this the end? Kyle Hendricks is going to get more of an opportunity with the Cubs. And what is interesting about the Cubs right now, they're also having a closer issue. Adbert Alzolay is not the guy as we've seen to this point in this season. He has had some difficulties. He is not going to be necessarily the closer going forward temporarily. But at the same time, with all the issues that the Cubs are having, Seiya Suzuki being out right now, he's injured. Well, they're still 13-9. With Hendricks, without Suzuki, with this situation in the bullpen, they're 13-9. They're not in first place because the Brewers have been red hot, but the Cubs are continuing to go forward, and maybe with Craig Counsell, they'll be able to figure it out. But those four guys, Snell, Goldschmidt, Abreu, and Hendricks, is it time to panic about them? I don't know that I would say panic is the right word, but certainly concern. And in some of those cases, Abreu in particular, we are tilting toward panic. Time now for the Inside Dish, the part of the show where I talk about maybe a story I've written, a trend in the game, something going on that has caught my attention. And today I want to talk about the Mets because I had them over the weekend for FS1. They were in Dodger Stadium. They won 2 of 3. They had a really good weekend. Extended their winning streak to 6 games before, of course, losing Sunday 10-0 in a rout. So the reason I want to talk about the Mets is kind of an extension of the column I wrote today, in which I listed 5 reasons to believe and 5 reasons to be worried. And I go back to spring training. Now, every spring in both Florida and Arizona, I tour the camps. I don't hit every camp, but I hit most every camp. And in some places, I spend more time than others. Some teams are more interesting than others, right? With the Mets, I stopped by, walked into their clubhouse, didn't see Justin Verlander, didn't see Max Scherzer. Now, they still have some stars, of course, Lindor and Alonso and some others. But this was a team that had an offseason of Luis Severinos and Adrian Hausers and Sean Manaeas and just didn't seem all that interesting to me. So I talked to a few guys, renewed acquaintances, did some normal things that I would do while stopping in a spring training camp. But I came out of there with nothing really that I wanted to say. Now, I could have, I guess, written essentially the column I wrote today, right? But at the same time, at that point, I didn't see them as particularly competitive, particularly interesting. And I remarked to their beat guys as I was leaving the park that day in Port St. Lucie. I said, guys, I'm not writing about the Mets tomorrow. I don't have much to say about the Mets right now. I don't think they're that interesting. And the beat writers, a couple of them that were there, said, you know what, Ken? We don't think they're that interesting either. Well, guess what? The season has started. The Mets were 0-5 to start the season. Nearly went 0-6 because they were no-hit into the 8th inning of their 6th game before rallying. And yet they have come out of this really nicely. They're 12-9. They obviously are competitive. They're a much better team for a lot of the reasons I listed today. But the thing that stood out to me this weekend, watching them and being by their dugout, was their manager, Carlos Mendoza. First year as the manager after 6 years as the New York Yankees bench coach. He's a guy that a lot of people were high on when he got this job. But in my career, I have developed over the years a bias against first-year managers. Now, it's a ridiculous bias in some fashion because you can't have a manager unless he starts in his first year, right? Everyone has to start somewhere. And the reason I have this bias is not unfounded, but it goes back to my days in Baltimore. Late 90s, the Orioles had 2 managers back-to-back who were first-year guys. Phil Regan was the first. He was fired after 1 year. And then they went to Davey Johnson for a time, and then they went to Ray Miller. So it wasn't back-to-back. 2 guys that were separated by Davey Johnson. Ray Miller also was a first-time manager after a long, distinguished career as a pitching coach, and he didn't fare well either with the Orioles and eventually was fired. So I witnessed these 2 first-time managers as a columnist in Baltimore, and I was like, nah, this is not a great thing. And I carried that with me all these years. And for whatever reason, whenever a guy is a first-timer, I kind of hesitate and wonder if he's going to succeed and wonder about all the issues that he might face. And I go back to when Aaron Boone was hired as the Yankees manager in 2017. You can look at Aaron right there. He looked a lot younger then before he had to go through all his trials and tribulations with the Yankees. And I questioned that hire. I was maybe the only person on a national level, even the local level, I think, to say, hey, what are they doing here? This is a big risk. This guy has never managed. Aaron Boone has done just fine. A lot of first-year managers have done just fine. In fact, we're seeing some hot teams right now led by first-year guys. The Brewers with Pat Murphy, the Guardians with Stephen Vogt, and yes, the Mets with Carlos Mendoza. And here's what impressed me about Mendoza over the weekend and over these first couple of weeks of the season. One, he is not afraid to make unpredictable decisions, go with unpredictable matchups rather than platoon advantages in certain situations. Now, he'll have his reasons for doing everything. He's not simply going on his gut. He's going on what a pitcher might be throwing, what a hitter might be doing at the particular moment, just all kinds of different equations that add up into the big equation, the decision of whether to pinch hit in a certain spot or whether not to. He has impressed me in that way. He also impressed me Saturday, bringing Edwin Diaz into the 8th inning of a game, the closer into the 8th inning of a game with a runner on first, 1 out, and Shohei Ohtani, Freddie Freeman coming up to bat. Now, Edwin Diaz in that inning walked Ohtani and Freeman to load the bases and then got out of it by retiring Teoscar Hernandez and Max Muncy. Did he come back for the 9th? Was this going to be a 5-out save for Edwin Diaz? No. At that point, Mendoza went to Reed Garrett. Reed Garrett, one of the great surprises of this early season, a guy who's been absolutely brilliant, but had thrown 33 pitches the night before. So, Mendoza was unafraid to use Diaz in the highest leverage spot in the game. Then he was unafraid to bring back Garrett after Diaz threw 20 pitches and kind of exhausted himself in that inning. Didn't want to go to Edwin Diaz for 5 outs this early in the season. This is cool stuff. This is the kind of thing a veteran manager might do, a guy who has some security might do, a guy who is not afraid might do. And Carlos Mendoza did all of those things. He is aggressive. He's on the attack all the time. That's the way Pete Alonso put it to me. The guy is on the attack. And for a first-year manager in a market the size of New York, it's impressive. Another thing that impressed me was the pure emotion he showed in the dugout. Now, most managers, including his predecessor, Buck Showalter, are rather stoic figures in the dugout, right? They don't show much at all. They're not fiery. If anything, they are quite stoic. Mendoza is not that way. Now, maybe he will be that way over time. Maybe he's living and dying with every move right now. But when something goes right, he is top step, emotional, fiery, kind of congratulating his guys. It's a cool look. Actually, a very cool look for a manager. And one other thing. Here's a guy, again, first-year manager. You never know what you're getting. Guy who's only been a bench coach, managed in the minor leagues, done some other things. But still, first year, and he's doing it in New York. New York is the most intense media market perhaps in the game. Boston and Philadelphia would be right there with New York, but New York has more media than either of those towns, and fans that can be on edge very quickly, like in Boston and Philadelphia, and just an overall high-pressure environment. Well, Mendoza has done well so far in that environment, and he explained to me that his 6 years as the Yankees bench coach kind of taught him what it's like as the head guy in New York. He worked under Aaron Boone all those years. And in 2018, his first season, what happened? Yankees win 100 games. Great year, right? Red Sox won 108, beat the Yankees in the division series, then went on to win the World Series, defeating the Dodgers. And Mendoza, as he recalls it, said that everyone was calling for everyone's head. Boone, Cashman, the whole deal. And as he put it, I learned quickly how this place works. So again, it's early for Carlos Mendoza as it is for every player, coach, and manager and executive in the game. But so far, so good. He didn't panic after the 0-5 start. He has not shown any fear in making moves, and he has been a positive, fiery, emotional presence for his players. All of these qualities are things you like to see in your manager. Now, I don't know where the Mets are going to end up this season, and that's kind of why I wrote what I did today. I wrote 5 reasons to believe, 5 reasons to be worried. But if they're in contention, they suddenly get interesting, right? Because at the deadline, they're already over the Steve Cohen tax threshold. They've got the highest payroll in the game. They will, I would imagine, try to do some things at the deadline if they're in it. Now, last year was just the opposite, and that's why they traded Verlander and Scherzer and David Robertson. They went backwards because they wanted to point toward 2025. Now, they weren't punting on 2024, and they didn't punt. They did some things this offseason, not as aggressive as maybe their fans would have wanted, or maybe what Cohen would have done in the past. But they, again, made some additions. And right now, they look like they're going to be in this big mix in the National League for the wild card races. Come the deadline, the Mets could get interesting. And come the rest of the season, they could get even more interesting. And then in the offseason, they gain tremendous payroll flexibility. Their payroll commitments for next year are about half of what they were for this year. So, good job by the Mets hiring Mendoza, by David Stearns, the president of baseball operations. Good start after their 0-5 initial beginning here. And it's going to be really interesting to see how this team and how this manager fare the rest of the way. Time now for Grillin Ken. Let's get to your questions. First question comes from Groot. Groot asks, which small market team has surprised you the most? Surprised they are better and surprised they are worse? I'm going to go with the better. And I'll say the White Sox are surprising me as far as worse. Yes, they're not really small market, but they're so bad it's kind of unfathomable. I advise you to go back and read Jason Stark's Weird and Wild on just how bad the White Sox have been. 3-17, not good, big market, small market, whatever you might be. Now, as for the good surprises, I mentioned them in the previous segment, and I want to go back to them in a little bit more depth. The Brewers, man, 14-6. Now, keep in mind what the Brewers are overcoming here, or what they faced to start the season. Craig Counsell is gone. Corbin Burnes traded. Brandon Woodruff injured. Devin Williams injured. These are four major pieces that the Brewers have had in recent years, four people who helped key their great success. And yet, even with all that right now going on, they are 14-6, as I mentioned. They swept the Cardinals this weekend. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know how their pitching has held up this far, much less going forward the rest of the season. They're doing this right now without Christian Yelich as well, but good for the Brewers, the way they're playing. They go all out all the time. They're young. They're unafraid. Maybe they're a little bit clueless, which is a good thing sometimes, but it's all working for them right now. And the other team I mentioned as well, Cleveland Guardians, 16-6, folks. This is the second best record for the Cleveland franchise after 22 games, second best in the team's 124-year history. That's amazing. And the biggest stunner with the Guardians is not just what they're doing on the mound without Shane Bieber. It's been okay, and they too, like the Brewers, have pitching questions going forward. No doubt about it. Bullpen's been great. But my gosh, what about the offense? That's the stunner. Last year, they were 27th in the majors in runs per game. Only 3 teams were worse. Utterly punchless. This year, they kind of adopted a new philosophy, trying to hit the ball hard, not just put it in play. And so far, so good. They're 5th in the majors. 5th in runs per game, and that is a huge turnaround. So those are my 2 good surprises, the Brewers and the Guardians. And yes, the bad surprise, we didn't think they would be good, the White Sox, but they're even worse than we thought. All right, next question. This one comes from Peter Kennedy. Peter asks, why doesn't MLB and other leagues mandate roofs for all new stadiums? Peter, it's a good question, I guess, because in many cities, of course, a retractable roof would be a desirable thing to have. But a league can't simply mandate it, because the question immediately becomes, who is going to pay for it? Now, if you want to mandate it and make your owners pay for it, that's fine. But leagues don't do that, do they? No. Leagues and owners always are asking for public money. For new stadiums with retractable roofs, for all kinds of things. So you can't just say as a league, we want the state of X to construct a ballpark for team Y with a retractable roof. And by the way, state X, you're going to have to pay for that sucker. The states involved here, any states in the United States, all 50, well, not all 50 have teams, of course, but no state is going to hear it from the league that, oh, you've got to build a roof to keep your team. Doesn't work like that. Good question, but we move on. Next one comes from Stripes, Yankees Stripes 9. The person asks, whoever this person is, can you realistically see Soto getting an Ohtani-sized contract in the upcoming offseason? Depends how you define the Ohtani-sized contract. Do I see Soto getting $700 million? Well, maybe not. But do I see him getting what the present day value of Ohtani's deal was, which was around $460 million? Yes, I see him topping that. To me, the floor for Juan Soto, because he is so young, he's 25 years old, the floor is going to be $500 million. And frankly, I would not be surprised to see him exceed that. I don't know how many years it's going to take. I don't know exactly how this is going to turn out. Remember, he turned down $440 for 15 from the Nationals in an extension a couple of years back. And while he might not get to 700, Ohtani's 700 is not a real 700 because 680 million of it is deferred 10 years. That's why the present day value is down below 500 million. So yeah, in that respect, I do expect Soto to surpass Ohtani. All right, we go to the next question here. This one's interesting because it concerns one of the great stars in the game right now, a guy I could have put in the opening segment as one of the struggling players, but I don't believe he's going to be struggling for long. This person asked, DRFU, as a concerned Blue Jay fan, ha ha ha, is there something physically going on with Judge? Now, I'm sure the Blue Jay fan is really concerned with Aaron Judge and how he's doing physically. I'm sure he can't sleep at night, or she, just worrying about how Aaron Judge is. Whether that abdominal strain that caused him to miss more than a week in spring training, or about a week, is flaring up again. And whether poor Aaron Judge and the poor Yankees are not going to be able to compete with the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't believe that Blue Jays fan is actually concerned. But Aaron Judge, batting 183 with 3 home runs through 100 plate appearances. Not a small sample. He obviously is struggling, but he feels he's close. I know the fans booed him at Yankee Stadium Saturday. That is about one of the most ridiculous things I've heard in recent times. Aaron Judge is one of the great players in the game and a guy who is the captain of the Yankees, done a lot of great things. I know it's a badge of honor to boo in certain cities and certain ballparks. But you won't be booing Aaron Judge for long. He says he's physically fine. There is no reason to believe that he is not physically fine. I expect him to come out of this and come out of this in a big way. I want to thank everyone for their questions. Thank everyone for listening, for watching. You know where to find us. YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Subscribe, like, and return with us on Thursday for our live show, co-hosted by Alanna Rizzo. Have a great week, everyone. We'll talk to you Thursday.
The first bet $1,500 offer is on. Download the BetMGM Sportsbook app on iOS or Android, or visit BetMGM.com. Sign up and deposit at least $10 into your new account. Place your first wager and receive up to $1,500 back in bonus bets. If the bet loses, got to use the bonus code FOUL, F-O-U-L. And if that bet does lose, your bonus bets will be available once your initial wager is settled. Gambling problem or concern? Call 1-800-GAMBLING.
Hey, everybody. Be sure to like and subscribe for more content. Fair Territory airs each week, and we'd love for you to become part of our community. Here's another video you might enjoy. See you next time.